The great hall of the Galactic Council was filled with panic. Hundreds of alien beings from across the galaxy sat in their floating chairs, all talking at once. Their voices mixed together in a sound like a storm of fear. At the center of it, all stood Ambassador Zethkar, a tall creature with blue skin and 4 arms. His eyes were wide with terror as he spoke into the communication device. "The Shadow Maw has awakened," he said, his voice shaking. "All ships must leave the Outer Rim sectors immediately. This is not a request. This is a survival order." The room fell silent for a moment. Then the panic started again, worse than before. Representatives from 17 different worlds began shouting orders to their home planets. Emergency evacuation protocols activated across the galaxy. Trade routes that had been used for thousands of years were shut down in minutes. The Shadow Maw was a creature of legend and nightmare. It stood 30 feet tall and was covered in black scales that could not be broken by any known weapon. Its breath was pure acid that could melt through the strongest ship hulls. It had razor-sharp claws longer than most beings were tall. But worst of all, it was smart. The creature knew how to hunt, how to track, and how to kill. For over 3,000 years, the Shadow Maw had been the galaxy's greatest fear. It would sleep for decades at a time, hidden in the dark spaces between stars. When it woke up, entire star systems would go dark, planets would be abandoned, civilizations would fall. The creature had destroyed more worlds than any war in galactic history. Now it was awake again, and the galaxy was running scared. 3 days away from the council chambers, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, the Terra Nova. He was reading the emergency message that had just come through their communication system. Jake was a tall man with brown hair and calm blue eyes. He had been exploring space for 15 years, and very little surprised him anymore. "Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, walking up to him with a datapad in her hands. "We just got this message from the Galactic Council. They want all ships to evacuate the Outer Rim sectors immediately." Amy was a smart woman in her early 30s. She had studied alien life forms for most of her adult life. Her job was to learn about new creatures and plants they found during their travels. She loved her work, and she was very good at it. Jake took the datapad and read the message. His eyebrows went up slightly. "The Shadow Maw? I've heard stories about that thing. The other species talk about it, like it's some kind of space monster. According to this data, it's killed billions of beings over the centuries," Amy said. "Every time it wakes up, entire civilizations pack up and leave their home worlds. They'd rather become refugees than face this creature." Chief Engineer Bob Turner walked over to join them. Bob was a big man with a thick beard and strong hands. He had been fixing things and building things his whole life. If something was broken, Bob could fix it. If something needed to be built, Bob could build it. "What's all this talk about some space monster?" Bob asked, wiping grease off his hands with a dirty cloth. Jake handed him the datapad. Bob read it quickly, his face showing no fear, only curiosity. "So this thing has been scaring entire star systems for thousands of years? And nobody's ever fought back?" "Look at these records," Amy said, pointing to her own datapad. "Every time the Shadow Maw appears, the response is the same. Immediate evacuation. Complete withdrawal from the area. They treat it like a natural disaster that can't be stopped." Pilot Lisa Chong joined the group. Lisa was a young woman with quick reflexes and an even quicker mind. She could fly anything with engines, and she had never met a challenge she didn't want to take on. "What are you all talking about?" Lisa asked. "Apparently there's some big scary creature heading this way," Bob said with a grin. "And the whole galaxy is running away from it." Lisa looked at the datapad that Jake handed her. She read it twice, then looked up with a confused expression. Wait, this thing is just a really big animal, right? I mean, it's not some kind of space god or something. According to the biological data, it's a living creature, Amy said. Large, dangerous, and very aggressive. But it's still just an animal. Then why doesn't anyone fight it? Lisa asked. I mean, humans have been hunting dangerous animals for thousands of years. We used to hunt things that could kill us with our bare hands. The four humans looked at each other. Around them, the bridge of the Terra Nova hummed quietly. The ship was small compared to the massive vessels used by other galactic species, but it was tough and reliable. It had taken them safely through unexplored regions of space that other species considered too dangerous to visit. Captain, said Communications Officer Steve Martinez, walking up to the group. Steve was responsible for all messages going in and out of the ship. He was a quiet man who paid attention to details that others might miss. What is it, Steve? Jake asked. I've been monitoring the galactic communication networks, Steve said. The panic is spreading fast. 3 major shipping companies have suspended all operations in the Outer Rim. The Altarian Defense Fleet is pulling back to their home system. Even the Klangari War Council is avoiding the area, and those guys fight everything. How many ships are we talking about? Bob asked. Thousands, Steve replied. Maybe tens of thousands. Entire trade routes are shutting down. Planets are preparing for evacuation. The economic impact is already huge. Jake thought about this for a moment. He looked at his crew, these humans who had chosen to explore the unknown regions of space. They were far from Earth, farther than any human had ever traveled before. They were supposed to be mapping new star systems and looking for resources that Earth could use. But now they had stumbled into something much more interesting. Amy, Jake said, what do we actually know about this creature? Not the legends and stories, but real facts. Amy scrolled through her datapad. The biological data is limited. Most of it comes from long-range scans taken by ships that were running away. But from what I can see, it's a carbon-based life form. It needs to eat, it needs to rest, and it follows basic biological rules. So it's not magic, Lisa said. It's just a really big, really dangerous animal. That's right, Amy confirmed. A very successful predator, but still just an animal. Bob stroked his beard thoughtfully. You know, back on Earth, we used to have animals that everyone was afraid of. Lions, tigers, bears, sharks. People thought they were unstoppable killing machines. And now we hunt them for sport, Lisa added with a smile. Jake made his decision. Steve, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we're going to investigate this Shadowmaw situation. Amy, I want you to study every piece of data we have about this creature. Bob, make sure our systems are running at peak efficiency. Lisa, plot a course for the creature's last known location. Captain, Steve said, are you sure about this? The entire galaxy is running away from this thing. Jake looked out at the stars through the bridge windows. Somewhere out there was a creature that had terrorized civilizations for thousands of years. It had never faced humans before. Steve, send one more message, Jake said, to the Galactic Council. Tell them that the crew of the Terra Nova is going to take a closer look at their Shadowmaw problem. What should I tell them if they ask why? Steve asked. Jake smiled. Tell them we're curious. As the Terra Nova changed course toward the Shadowmaws territory, none of the crew members felt afraid. They felt excited. They were about to meet the galaxy's greatest predator. They had no idea they were about to change galactic history forever. 3 days later, the Terra Nova was flying through space toward the danger zone. All around them, alien ships were flying in the opposite direction. Some were huge cargo vessels loaded with entire families. Others were military ships that should have been brave enough to fight anything. But they were all running away, as fast as their engines could carry them. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the fleeing ships. His crew was busy preparing for their mission. Everyone had a job to do, and everyone was excited to do it. This was not how other species reacted to the Shadow Mole threat, but humans were different. "Captain," said Communications Officer Steve Martinez, "I'm getting messages from some of the fleeing ships. They want to know why we're flying toward the danger instead of away from it." "What are you telling them?" Jake asked. "The truth," Steve replied with a grin, "that we want to take a look at this creature everyone is so afraid of." Jake nodded. "Any response from the Galactic Council about our message?" "Yes, sir. They sent back a message that was mostly screaming. Something about humans being crazy and how we're going to get ourselves killed. They strongly advised us to turn around and evacuate like everyone else." "And what did you tell them?" "I told them we appreciate their concern, but we'll handle things from here." Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez walked onto the bridge carrying several data pads and looking very pleased with herself. She had been working for 3 days straight, studying every piece of information about the Shadow Mole that she could find. "Captain, I have some very interesting news," Amy said. "I've been analyzing all the data about the Shadow Mole, and I know why no one has ever been able to fight it successfully." "Let's hear it," Jake said. Amy activated the main screen, showing a 3-dimensional image of the creature. It was indeed terrifying to look at. 30 feet tall, covered in black scales, with claws like swords and teeth like daggers. Its eyes glowed red, and acid dripped from its mouth. "The problem is that every species that has encountered the Shadow Mole has treated it like a supernatural force," Amy explained. "They see this thing and immediately assume it's impossible to kill, so they run away without even trying to fight." "But it's not supernatural," said Chief Engineer Bob Turner, who had just joined them on the bridge. "It's just a big animal." "Exactly," Amy said. "Look at these biological scans. The creature has a normal metabolism. It needs food, water, and rest just like any other living thing. Its scales are tough, but they're not invincible. Its acid breath is dangerous, but it's not unlimited. The creature gets tired after using it too much." Pilot Lisa Chong looked at the data with interest. "So you're saying this thing has weaknesses that no one has ever bothered to look for?" "That's exactly what I'm saying," Amy replied. "Every encounter with the Shadow Mole has been the same. Ships detect it, panic, and run away immediately. No one has ever stayed long enough to study it properly or figure out how to fight it." Marine Sergeant Pete Collins walked onto the bridge. Pete was a tough man who had fought in wars on 3 different planets before joining the Terra Nova crew. He was responsible for the ship's security and weapon systems. If there was going to be a fight, Pete would be ready for it. "Captain, I've been reviewing our weapon systems," Pete said. "We're not equipped for hunting something this big. Most of our weapons are designed for ship-to-ship combat or dealing with smaller threats. What do you suggest?" Jake asked. Pete smiled. "We modify our equipment. Back on Earth, humans have been hunting large, dangerous animals for thousands of years. We know how to do this. We just need to adapt our techniques for space." "What kind of modifications are you thinking about?" Bob asked. "Specialized harpoons for one thing," Pete replied. "Something that can penetrate those scales and hold the creature in place. Tranquilizer compounds that can affect its nervous system. Net launchers to restrict its movement. Basic hunting tools, but scaled up for something this size." Amy nodded enthusiastically. "I can help with the tranquilizer compounds. Now that I understand the creature's biology better, I can design something that will work on its system." "How long will all this take?" Jake asked. "Give us a week," Bob said. "Pete and I can modify the weapon systems. Amy can work on the chemical compounds. We can turn this ship into a proper hunting vessel. Jake looked at his crew. They were all eager to get started. No fear, no panic, just excitement about a new challenge. Do it, he said. Over the next week, the Terra Nova was transformed. Bob and his engineering team worked around the clock to modify the ship's systems. They converted cargo bays into workshops and laboratories. They built new weapons designed specifically for hunting large prey. They installed specialized equipment that could track and analyze the Shattermaw's behavior. Pete and his security team practiced with the new weapons every day. They ran combat simulations and developed tactics for fighting a creature that was much larger than anything they had faced before. They studied videos of Earth animals hunting in packs and adapted those strategies for their mission. Amy worked with the ship's medical team to develop tranquilizer compounds. She tested different chemical combinations until she found ones that should work on the Shattermaw's nervous system. She also studied the creature's movement patterns and behavior, learning everything she could about how it hunted and killed. Lisa spent her time studying the local star system where the Shattermaw was located. She mapped out asteroid fields and space debris that could be used for cover during a fight. She planned escape routes and identified safe areas where the ship could retreat if necessary. Steve monitored galactic communications, keeping track of the creature's movements. The Shattermaw had destroyed 2 small mining stations and was moving toward a larger colony world. The colonists were evacuating as fast as they could, leaving behind everything they had built. "Captain," Steve reported, "the creature is following a predictable pattern. It attacks isolated targets first, then moves toward larger population centers. We have maybe 4 days before it reaches the main colony." "Are the colonists evacuating?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir, but slowly. They have over 1 million people to move, and not enough ships. At their current rate, they'll never get everyone out. Time." Jake made his decision. "Then we stop it before it gets there." Chef Danny Phillips had been quietly listening to all the planning and preparation. Danny was responsible for feeding the crew, but he had also studied xenobiology and knew a lot about different alien life forms. He had been thinking about the Shattermaw in a way that no one else had considered. "Captain," Danny said, "I have a question that might sound strange." "What is it, Danny?" "Has anyone ever wondered what this thing tastes like?" The bridge went quiet. Everyone looked at Danny with surprise. "I mean," Danny continued, "we're treating this like a hunting expedition, right? Back on Earth, when we hunted large, dangerous animals, we used every part of them. Meat, hide, bones, everything. This creature is huge. If we're successful, there's going to be a lot of meat to deal with." Amy's eyes lit up with excitement. "Danny, that's brilliant. We're not just hunting this thing to kill it. We're hunting it to use it, like our ancestors did with mammoths and other large prey." "Exactly," Danny said. "And if this meat is edible, it could feed a lot of people. Maybe even the colonists who are being evacuated." Jake smiled. His crew was thinking like humans. They weren't just planning to destroy a threat. They were planning to turn it into something useful. "Danny, start researching food preparation techniques for large alien creatures." Jake said, "Amy, add nutritional analysis to your biological studies. Everyone else, keep preparing for the hunt." As the Terra Nova approached the Shattermaw's territory, the crew was ready. They had weapons, they had plans, and they had something that no other species had ever brought to a fight with the galaxy's apex predator. They had the confidence that comes from being human. The Terra Nova drifted silently through the asteroid field, its engines running at minimum power. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the long-range sensors. Somewhere out there in the darkness was the most feared creature in the galaxy. His crew had spent a week preparing for this moment, and now it was time to put their plans into action. "Contact," whispered Communications Officer Steve Martinez. The Shadow Mall is 3 kilometers away, moving slowly through the outer asteroids. Jake felt his heart beat faster, but not from fear. This was excitement, the same feeling humans got when they were about to do something that had never been done before. Put it on the main screen. The screen flickered to life, showing a grainy image of the creature. Even through the poor quality of the long-range sensors, the Shadow Mall was terrifying to look at. It moved like a giant predator, confident and deadly. Its black scales caught the light from distant stars, and its red eyes glowed in the darkness. "It's bigger than I expected," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, studying her instruments. "The biological readings are off the charts. This thing is incredibly strong." "But still just an animal," said Marine Sergeant Pete Collins. He was wearing his modified combat suit and carrying weapons that had been specially designed for this hunt. "Are we ready to begin?" Jake nodded. "Phase 1 starts now. Amy, activate the tracking devices. Pete, get your team ready. Bob, bring us to silent running mode." Chief Engineer Bob Turner pressed several buttons on his control panel. The Terra Nova's engines went completely quiet. The ship's lights dimmed to almost nothing. They were now invisible to most sensors, drifting through space like just another piece of space debris. The plan was simple but dangerous. They would track the Shadow Mall for several hours, learning its behavior patterns and waiting for the right moment to strike. Amy's research had shown that the creature was most vulnerable when it was feeding or resting. They just had to wait for their chance. "The creature is approaching the mining station ruins," Amy reported. "It's probably looking for survivors or leftover technology to destroy." The Shadow Mall moved through the wreckage of the mining station like a shark through water. It used its massive claws to tear apart metal structures, searching for anything that moved. The creature's acid breath melted through steel like it was paper. No wonder other species were so afraid of it. "Look at how it hunts," Pete observed. "It's methodical, intelligent. This isn't just a mindless monster. It knows what it's doing." Jake watched the creature's movements carefully. The Shadow Mall was indeed smart, but it was also predictable. It followed the same patterns that any predator would use when searching for prey. That predictability was something humans could use against it. "Captain," said pilot Lisa Chong, "I'm reading some interesting energy patterns from the creature. Its metabolism spikes when it uses the acid breath, then drops significantly afterward." Amy was right about it having limitations. Amy nodded excitedly. "The creature needs to rest after using its most powerful attacks. That's when we can strike." They watched for 3 more hours as the Shadow Mall methodically destroyed the remains of the mining station. The creature was thorough, making sure nothing was left alive. But Jake noticed something important. After each burst of acid breath, the creature would pause for several minutes, almost like it was catching its breath. "There's our opening," Jake said. "Pete, are you ready?" Pete Collins had been a soldier for most of his adult life. He had fought in battles that would have scared most people to death, but he had never hunted anything like this before. Still, he felt confident. His team was ready. Their equipment was tested, and they had surprise on their side. "Team Alpha is ready, Captain," Pete reported. "Corporal Kate Johnson and Private Ryan Beck are in position with the harpoon launchers. I'll take point with the tranquilizer rifle." "Remember the plan," Jake said. "We're not trying to kill it immediately. We want to slow it down first, tire it out, then move in for the final strike." The Terra Nova moved closer to the Shadow Mall, still running silent. The creature had no idea they were there. It was focused on destroying the last pieces of the mining station, using its acid breath to melt through a large metal beam. "Now," Jake whispered. Pete fired the first tranquilizer dart. It was the size of a small spear and contained enough chemical compounds to knock out a blue whale. The dart struck the shadow maw in the neck, right between two scales. The creature roared in surprise and pain, spinning around to look for its attacker. Kate Johnson fired her harpoon launcher. The harpoon was connected to the Terra Nova by a strong cable. It buried itself deep in the creature's left shoulder. The shadow maw roared again, this time in anger, and tried to pull the harpoon free. Ryan Beck fired his harpoon from the other side. Now the creature was connected to the ship by two cables, limiting its movement. The shadow maw thrashed wildly, trying to break free, but the cables held. "It's working," Amy said, watching her instruments. "The tranquilizer is starting to affect its nervous system. Its reaction time is slowing down." But the shadow maw was far from defeated. The creature turned toward the Terra Nova and opened its mouth. A stream of acid shot out, heading straight for the ship. "Evasive maneuvers," Jake ordered. Lisa Chong was ready. She fired the ship's engines and pulled the Terra Nova out of the acid stream's path. The acid missed them by only a few meters, but it was enough. The ship was safe, and the creature had used up more of its energy. "Fire the nets," Pete ordered. Two large nets shot out from the Terra Nova, each one designed to wrap around large prey. The nets were made of a special material that could resist the creature's claws and acid. They wrapped around the shadow maw's arms and legs, making it even harder for the creature to move. The battle continued for 2 more hours. The shadow maw was incredibly strong and refused to give up easily. It broke free from some of the restraints and damaged others. But slowly, the tranquilizer compounds were taking effect. The creature's movements became slower and less coordinated. "It's getting tired," Amy reported. "Heart rate is dropping. Brain activity is decreasing. The tranquilizer is working." Pete and his team fired more darts, adding more chemicals to the creature's system. Each dart contained a different compound designed to affect a different part of the shadow maw's biology. Amy had studied the creature's nervous system for days, and her work was paying off. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the shadow maw stopped fighting. The massive creature floated in space, still alive, but completely unable to move. Its red eyes still glowed with anger, but its body would not obey its commands. "We did it," Pete said, hardly believing it himself. "We actually did it." The bridge of the Terra Nova was quiet for a moment. Then everyone started talking at once, excited and amazed by what they had accomplished. They had just defeated the galaxy's most feared predator, and they had done it without destroying their ship or losing any crew members. "Status report," Jake said, trying to keep his crew focused. "The creature is alive, but completely paralyzed," Amy reported. "It will stay that way for at least 12 hours, maybe longer." "Ship status is good," Bob said. "Minor damage to the hull from acid splash, but nothing serious. All systems are working normally. No injuries to the crew," Pete added. "Everyone performed perfectly." Jake looked at the massive creature floating helplessly in space. The shadow maw had terrorized the galaxy for thousands of years. Entire civilizations had fled from it in terror. And now it was defeated by a single human ship and a crew of 37 people. "Well," Jake said with a smile, "now comes the hard part." Chef Danny Phillips had been watching the entire battle from his station in the kitchen. He was all ready, preparing his equipment and planning the next phase of their mission. "Captain," Danny said over the communication system, "request permission to begin food preparation procedures." Jake laughed. "Permission granted, Chef. Let's see what the galaxy's apex predator tastes like." The cargo bay of the Terra Nova had been transformed into something the galaxy had never seen before. Chef Danny Phillips stood in the center of it all, wearing his best cooking uniform and directing his team with the confidence of a master chef. Preparing for the most important meal of his career, the shadow maw lay on a massive platform that Chief Engineer Bob Turner had built specially for this moment. The creature was still unconscious from the tranquilizer, but its body was perfectly preserved. Danny had spent the last 6 hours studying every inch of it, figuring out the best way to prepare what was probably the largest meal in galactic history. "This is incredible," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, scanning the creature with her instruments. "The meat has a protein structure unlike anything I've ever seen. It's perfectly safe to eat, and the nutritional value is off the charts." Captain Jake Morrison watched from the observation deck as his crew worked below. Word of their success had spread across the galaxy faster than he had expected. Ships were already heading toward their location, not to evacuate, but to see if the rumors were true. Had humans really defeated the legendary Shadow Mole? "Captain," said Communications Officer Steve Martinez, "we're getting hundreds of messages from ships across the sector. Everyone wants to know what we did with the creature." "What are you telling them?" Jake asked. Steve grinned. "The truth. We're having a barbecue." Down in the cargo bay, Danny was explaining his plan to the crew. "The key to cooking something this large is to understand the different types of meat," he said. "Just like with any large animal, different parts of the body will have different flavors and textures." Marine Sergeant Pete Collins looked at the massive creature with amazement. He had helped hunt it, but seeing it up close was still impressive. "How much meat are we talking about here?" "Conservative estimate," Danny said, "about 50,000 pounds of usable meat. That's enough to feed a small army for months." "Or," said pilot Lisa Chong with a smile, "enough to throw the biggest dinner party in galactic history." Danny nodded enthusiastically. "That's exactly what I was thinking. We're going to invite everyone who wants to come. This is going to be a celebration that the galaxy will never forget." The first alien ship arrived 6 hours later. It was a small scout vessel from the Altarian Republic. The pilot, a nervous creature named Vexstar, had been monitoring human communications and couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Terra Nova, this is Scout Ship Blue Wind," came the transmission. "Is it true that you have defeated the Shadow Mole?" Jake answered personally. "Blue Wind, this is Captain Morrison. Yes, we have successfully captured the creature. Would you like to come aboard and see for yourself?" There was a long pause. Then Vexstar's voice came back, shaking with disbelief. "You want me to come aboard a ship that has the Shadow Mole on it?" "The creature is completely safe," Jake assured him. "It's been processed and is currently being prepared for dinner. We'd be honored to have you as our guest." Another long pause. "Did you say dinner?" "That's right. We're having a feast, and you're invited." Vexstar's ship docked with the Terra Nova an hour later. The Altarian pilot was a small, blue-skinned being with large eyes and thin arms. He walked very carefully through the ship's corridors, expecting to be attacked by the terrible monster at any moment. When he reached the cargo bay, Vexstar stopped and stared. The Shadow Mole was still there, but it was no longer a terrifying predator. Danny and his team had butchered it with expert skill, turning the fearsome creature into cuts of meat that looked almost normal. "Is that really the Shadow Mole?" Vexstar whispered. "It sure is," Danny said cheerfully. "Would you like to try a sample? I've got some steaks cooking right now." Vexstar looked like he might faint. The idea of eating the galaxy's most feared predator was so shocking that his mind could barely process it. But the smell coming from Danny's cooking area was absolutely delicious. "It smells good," Vexstar admitted. "It tastes even better," Danny said, handing him a small piece of cooked meat. On a plate. "The flavor is unique. Sort of like a cross between beef and fish, but with a texture that's completely its own." Vexstar took a tiny bite. His eyes went wide. Then he took a bigger bite. Then he started eating faster. "This is amazing," he said between bites. "How is this possible?" The Shadow Maw is supposed to be deadly poison. Amy Rodriguez walked over with her datapad. Actually, that was just another myth. The creature's meat is not only safe to eat, it's incredibly nutritious. It contains proteins and vitamins that could solve food shortages on dozens of worlds. Word spread even faster after Vexstar sent a message to his government describing the taste of Shadow Maw meat. Within 12 hours, ships were arriving from all over the galaxy. Not warships or evacuation vessels, but passenger ships full of beings who wanted to see this miracle for themselves. Jake found himself acting as the host for the strangest diplomatic gathering in galactic history. Representatives from 17 different species came aboard the Terra Nova, all of them wanting to see the defeated Shadow Maw and taste the meat that Danny was preparing. "This is incredible," said Ambassador Krell from the Vorthan Empire. A tall creature with 4 arms and purple skin. "My people have feared the Shadow Maw for over 2,000 years. To see it like this, it changes everything." "How did you do it?" asked General Thax from the Klingari War Council. The Klangari were known as fierce warriors, but even they had never tried to fight the Shadow Maw. "What weapons did you use?" Pete Collins was happy to explain. "Standard hunting techniques, adapted for space combat. Tranquilizer darts, restraining nets, and patience. The creature is dangerous, but it's still just an animal. Animals can be hunted if you know what you're doing. But why didn't anyone try this before?" asked Dr. Zara from the Centauri Medical Institute. Amy answered that question. Because everyone was too scared to study the creature properly. They saw the Shadow Maw as a supernatural force instead of a biological entity. Once we understood its biology, defeating it became much easier. The feast officially began 18 hours after the hunt ended. Danny had prepared dozens of different dishes using various parts of the Shadow Maw. There were steaks, roasts, soups, and even some experimental dishes that combined Shadow Maw meat with spices from different worlds. The main dining area had been set up in the largest cargo bay. Tables and chairs had been brought in from several ships, creating a restaurant that could seat over 200 beings. The lighting was warm and welcoming, nothing like the usual sterile environment of a spaceship. Jake stood up to address the crowd. Beings from across the galaxy sat at tables together, many of them former enemies who had been brought together by their shared amazement at what the humans had accomplished. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake said, 6 days ago, the galaxy was in panic about the return of the Shadow Maw. Today, we're sharing a meal made from that same creature. This is what happens when you stop running from your fears and start facing them head on. The crowd cheered, a sound that included dozens of different alien voices all expressing the same emotion. Joy. Danny stepped forward with the first course. Tonight's menu features Shadow Maw prepared 17 different ways, representing culinary traditions from across the galaxy. We've combined human cooking techniques with spices and methods from your own worlds. The first bite was a moment that would be remembered in galactic history. Beings who had spent their entire lives fearing the Shadow Maw were now eating it for dinner. The meat was tender, flavorful, and completely safe. "This is the best meal I've ever had," declared Ambassador Zethkar, the same being who had announced the Shadow Maw's awakening to the Galactic Council just a week earlier. As the evening continued, something amazing happened. The fear that had gripped the galaxy for thousands of years began to disappear. The Shadow Maw was no longer a terrifying monster. It was dinner. And it was delicious. By the time the feast ended, over 300 beings from 47 different worlds had tasted Shadow Maw meat. Every single one of them left the Terra Nova with a new understanding of what was possible when fear was replaced with determination. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after the Shadow Maw feast, the galaxy was a completely different place. Captain Jake Morrison stood in what used to be the cargo bay of the Terra Nova, but was now the most famous restaurant in known space. The walls were covered with pictures and news reports from dozens of worlds, all telling the story of how humans had changed everything. "Captain Morrison," said the reporter, "a friendly creature from the Galactic News Network. How does it feel to know that your crew has revolutionized how the galaxy thinks about dangerous creatures?" Jake smiled as he looked around the room. Where the Shadow Maw had once laid, there were now dining tables filled with beings from across the galaxy. They were all eating meals prepared by Chef Danny Phillips, who had become the most famous cook in galactic history. "Honestly," Jake said, "we never expected any of this. We just saw a problem and decided to solve it the way humans always solve problems. We studied it, we planned for it, and then we dealt with it." The Terra Nova was no longer just an exploration ship. It had become a floating embassy, restaurant, and headquarters for what the galactic media had started calling Morrison's Monster Hunters. The name had stuck, even though Jake thought it was a bit silly. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez walked over, carrying a datapad full of requests. She was no longer just the ship's biologist. She had become the galaxy's leading expert on dangerous creatures and how to deal with them safely. "Captain," Amy said, "we just got 3 new requests for help. The Centauri system has a creature they call the Void Eater that's been destroying their mining operations. The Altarian Republic wants us to look at something called the Star Wraith. And the Klingari War Council is asking for advice about a creature that's been attacking their battle fleets." Jake nodded. This was how things worked now. Whenever a species encountered a dangerous creature, instead of running away or abandoning entire systems, they called for human help. The Terra Nova and her crew had proven that there was no such thing as an unstoppable monster. "What's our schedule looking like?" Jake asked. Amy checked her datapad. "We're booked solid for the next 8 months. 43 different species have requested our services. The waiting list is getting longer every day." Chief Engineer Bob Turner joined them, wiping his hands on a greasy cloth. He had been busy upgrading the Terra Nova systems to handle their new role as the galaxy's premier monster hunting ship. "The new equipment is almost finished," Bob reported. "We've got specialized hunting gear for 12 different types of dangerous creatures. The weapon systems have been upgraded, and I've added 3 more cargo bays for processing large prey." "How many ships are we up to now?" Jake asked. 7, Bob said with pride. "The Terra Nova is still our flagship, but we've got 6 other ships working with us now. Each one is crewed by humans and equipped with the best hunting gear we can build." Pilot Lisa Chong walked over from the communications station. She was now the fleet coordinator, responsible for managing all 7 ships and their missions across the galaxy. "Captain," Lisa said, "I just got word from the Helix Nebula mission. Captain Brown and his crew successfully dealt with the Crystal Serpent. Took them 3 days, but they brought it down without any casualties. The locals are all ready, planning a celebration feast." Jake smiled. Captain Brown had been one of the first humans to volunteer for the monster hunting program. His success proved that the Terra Nova's methods could be used by other crews. "Any word on the meat quality?" Jake asked. "Excellent, according to the initial reports," Lisa replied. "The Crystal Serpent apparently tastes like a cross between chicken and lobster. Chef Phillips is already working on recipes." Danny Phillips himself appeared at that moment, wearing his signature cooking uniform and carrying a tray of samples. He had become something of a celebrity across the galaxy. His cookbook, Cooking the Galaxy's Deadliest Creatures, was a bestseller on 47 different worlds. "Captain," Danny said, "I've got the latest batch of Void Walker steaks ready for testing. I think I've finally perfected the seasoning blend." Jake took a sample and tasted it. The Void Walker had been one of their more recent hunts, a massive creature that lived in the empty spaces between star systems. Like all the others, it had seemed impossible to defeat until humans applied proper hunting techniques. "Delicious as always, Danny," Jake said. "How's the supply situation?" "We're doing well," Benny replied. The Shadowmoor meat lasted for 3 months, feeding over 50,000 beings. The crystal serpent should provide food for another 2 months. And we've got requests from 12 different worlds wanting to hire us specifically for food production. Marine Sergeant Pete Collins walked into the dining area wearing his dress uniform. He had been promoted to head of security for the entire monster hunting fleet. His team now included Marines from 6 different human ships, all trained in the specialized techniques needed to hunt dangerous space creatures. "Captain," Pete said, "I just finished the training session with the new recruits. 24 more Marines, all eager to hunt monsters. They're ready for deployment." "How are they adapting to the training?" Jake asked. "Like all humans," Pete said with a grin. "They see a dangerous creature, and their first thought is, how do we kill it, and what does it taste like? It's like we're all programmed for this kind of work." Communications Officer Steve Martinez approached the group carrying a priority message. "Captain, we just received this from the Galactic Council. They want to make an official announcement." Jake read the message and started laughing. "They want to officially recognize humans as the galaxy's apex predator management specialists. They're also offering us a permanent seat on the council and a formal contract to deal with dangerous creatures across all member worlds." "What? Did you tell them?" Amy asked. "I told them we'd consider it," Jake said, "but only if they agree to our terms." "Which are?" Lisa asked. "First, we maintain complete independence in how we operate. Second, all meat from successful hunts gets distributed to worlds that need food. And third, they have to stop calling dangerous creatures unstoppable or legendary. They're just animals, and we're going to treat them like animals." The group was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Zethkar, the same Vorthan who had first announced the Shadowmaw's awakening 6 months earlier. He now served as the official liaison between the human monster hunters and the Galactic Council. "Captain Morrison," Zethkar said, "I bring greetings from the Council and an update on the galaxy's status." "Let's hear it," Jake said. "Since your success with the Shadowmaw, fear-related evacuations have dropped by 87%, Zethkar reported. Trade routes that had been abandoned for centuries are being reopened. 3 star systems that were considered permanently uninhabitable are now being resettled." "And the creatures?" Amy asked. 43 different species of dangerous creatures have been successfully hunted by human crews, Zethkar continued. "Not a single one has proven to be actually unstoppable. The galaxy's understanding of dangerous wildlife has been completely revolutionized." Jake looked around at his crew, these humans who had accidentally become the galaxy's saviors, simply by refusing to be afraid. They had proven something that no other species had ever considered, that intelligence, preparation, and courage could overcome any threat. "There's one more thing," Zethkar said. "The Council has decided to create a new galactic holiday. They're calling it Monster Hunter Day, and it will be celebrated with feasts featuring meat from creatures that were once considered too dangerous to approach." Danny's eyes lit up. "A galactic cooking holiday? I'll need to start planning menus immediately." Jake laughed. "Danny, I think you're going to be very busy." As the Terra Nova continued its journey through space, heading toward their next monster hunting assignment, Jake reflected on how much had changed. The galaxy was no longer a place of terror and fear. It was a place of opportunity and adventure. Humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or diplomats, but as the species that looked at the galaxy's most feared creatures and asked the most human question of all: how do they taste with garlic butter? The galaxy's apex predators had met their match. and their match was hungry.